Hi everyone, my name is Abby, and today we are going to be discussing the biological and ecological effects of persistent pollutants on filter feeding bivalves. So, a quick outline is what are bivalves because we need a little recap on what bivalves are from 205. We're going to look at the bivalve ecological importance, and then we're going to look at pollutant pathways and how pollutants enter marine ecosystems. Then we're going to look at heavy metals, microplastics, and pharmaceuticals and their effects on bivalves. Then we're going to look at the ecological implications, how community structure can be altered because of bivalves being harmed. And then we're going to look at and have a summary and future directions slide just to wrap everything up. So, what are bivalves? Bivalves are members of the class Bivalvia within the phylum Mollusca. So, their key traits are having a double valved shell protecting soft inner body. And they also have an elaborate filter feeding system pumping water from the inhalant and exhalant siphons here, as seen from my cursor. The major groups discussed within this paper and presentation are going to be oysters, mussels, and clams. So, bivalves and their ecological importance. They are very important trophically and within food chains because they're key species for top predators like sea stars, birds, and even humans. And it's very important to realize that whatever they're eating, we will eventually be eating. So this is why I'm doing the presentation on how pollutants are affecting bivalves. And they also are very economically important for fisheries and aquaculture. They increase sediment stability because they are typically infaunal and benthic. They can also be epifaunal. The biggest thing is that because of their filtration system, they have the ability to purify water, removing plankton, bacteria, and suspended solids from the water column. And here we have a video looking at the filtration rates of bivalves. Here, there's some clams in a tank, and it's about 9 liters, and it takes 100 minutes for it to completely clear out. As you can see, I'm just going to skip a little bit. So it's important because they regulate nutrients from the water column to the benthos. So here we have the slide looking at the pathways of pollutants and entering marine ecosystems. So there are point source pollutants, and these are a single identifiable source. So through the figure, we can see that factories, vessels, anything with like even just like a pipe with one identifiable source can be a point source pollutants. And it's really important because these are very hypothetically easier to manage since they only come from one source. On the other hand, non-point source pollutants come from unidentifiable sources like roads and surface runoff, cities, farms, and atmospheric deposition. So these are very hard to manage since there's no one pinpoint of how these pollutants are entering waterways. It's very important also to know that any surface runoff from agriculture and roads typically ends up in freshwater streams and then rivers and then eventually marine ecosystems. So any pollutants that are going like inland will eventually end up in marine ecosystems. And a definition is for persistent pollutants is that they're substances that resist biological breakdown and remain in the environment for extended periods of time. So we're going to look at heavy metals first. Heavy metals are defined as naturally occurring metals and metalloids with atomic weights between 63.5 and 200.6 grams per mole and have densities greater than 435. Typically, they enter marine ecosystems through industrial waste and wastewater treatments, especially because historically and still currently, a lot of industrial waste from mining end up entering marine ecosystems. And non-point sources are surface runoff, atmospheric deposition, and volcanoes. And some examples of heavy metals are mercury, arsenic, cadmium, and lead. So, the effects of heavy metals on bivalves. So metalloid compounds, they can accumulate within the tissues of bivalves, especially because they're soft-bodied. They interact with DNA and nuclear proteins, and this results in DNA damage and disruption of cellular functions. So one study found that after 28 days of exposure in immature clams, they showed inhibited water filtration and gonad development, which this is very important since um, bivalves need to filter water to get food and also to expel waste. So if they can't do this, then they will likely die, which is very unfortunate. And now we're going to look at microplastics. So microplastics are defined as plastic particles ranging from 1 micron to 5 millimeters. These originate from the breakdown of larger plastic debris and take centuries to break down. They typically enter through point sources like urban wastewater treatment plants and stormwater outflows. One thing to mention, which I didn't know this until researching, is that every time you wash clothing, since it's synthetic fibers, usually microplastics will enter waterways through that way, which is crazy. Um, Also, they can enter through non-point sources like surface runoff or atmospheric deposition. Additionally, um, microplastics, a study found that microplastics have very similar sizes to plankton, which they eat. So it's very easy for them to be permeable within their tissues. So here, microplastics as small as 10 micron meters can move from hemolymph within the circulatory system of bivalves into the digestive gland lining within mussels and oysters. So here you can see there's some plastic particles here within the lumen of the stomach and the intestine. And the biggest effects from my paper found that there was reduced reproductive ability, decreased feeding again, and altered immunological processes. So, one study found that one species of mussels, when they were exposed to microplastics, had significant alterations to their immunoresponses, specifically with hemocytes, which are analogous to our white blood cells. They also altered phagocytosis activity, which that's the process engulfing and destroying pathogens. So if they have compromised immune systems, this makes bivalves very vulnerable to any pathogens and again, resulting in mortality. So next are what PPCPs are. They're a diverse group of pollutants from pharmaceuticals to personal care products like soaps and sunscreens. Specifically within this presentation, we're just going to look at fluoroxine hydrochloride, which is an antidepressant, since it's very commonly found within waterways. A common pathway for these are just through, again, urban wastewater treatment and stormwater outflows. So, the effects of PCPs on bivalves. A study found that, again, they altered reproduction through oocyte maturation, induction of spawning, and gill ciliary activity. So, this antidepressant delays the reuptake of serotonin and modulates neurotransmission in the human brain. But it's important that any concentrations within marine ecosystems will elicit a response in other species, like bivalves. So serotonin is actually one of the key neuromodulators within bivalves, and it regulates all of these processes I've talked about before. So, for example, if it delays or impacts like neurological transmissions for like ciliary responses, that completely damage, well, doesn't completely damage, but it can possibly damage um, the ciliary pumping of water through the inhalant and exhalant siphons. And that can, again, inhibit digestion and actually taking in plankton. And it also is harmful because any metabolic waste and everything will just accumulate within the bivalve and they can't expel it. So very, very important. And next, we're just going to look at the ecological implications. So chronic pollutants, like the ones that I've discussed, can alter community structure and community ecosystem function. Um, they have seen in papers that there are significant reductions in biodiversity through either decreasing richness and or evenness. Typically, when there's chronic pollutants within a marine ecosystem, um, certain species are more pollutant tolerant than other species. So those pollutant tolerant species will kind of exclude and have increased competitive ability over species that aren't as tolerant, and any species trophically that are dependent on those at-risk species will be affected also. So this can trigger some cascade effects as well, especially if top predators can't eat these at-risk species. Additionally, heavy metals, microplastics, and recently pharmaceuticals, they have been found to accumulate within bivalves, especially because of their persistence in marine ecosystems, and that impacts humans and also predators. Hopefully, this presentation does not make you totally hate oysters and mussels. So lastly, we just have a summary here. So bivalves are fundamental within marine ecosystems, and their filter feeding place them at risk to persistent pollutants. Pollutants can enter marine ecosystems through two pathways: point source pollutants and non-source pollutants. Across all persistent pollutants, heavy metals, microplastics, and pharmaceuticals affect feeding ability and reproduction. Additionally, decreased fitness in bivalves will result in altered structure and may cause trophic cascading effects. Also, to mention, if there's any losses in biodiversity, that completely will make ecosystems less resilient to things like climate change, which we know ocean acidification will harm bivalves because of their um, calcium carbonate shell. So, any future directions now is just to increase proper management of wastewater treatment plants, especially trying to research how to limit non-point source pollutants within marine ecosystems because they're very hard to manage, and also continue research towards the implications of PPCs and their bioaccumulation towards humans. Thank you.